Let's just applaud, Robbie. Applaud. Please clap. Applause.
This is like the end of a Harry Potter movie.
Just there's a scene in The Office where Michael Scott goes, everyone quick, just clap, applause. And they're all like, why are we clapping? As someone walks in. That's how I feel for Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead right now.
Man.
What an episode of television. I have loved this show. And everything I'm about to say does not diminish the rest of the show. But this is next level when they're involved. I am so on board with what they do.
Yeah.
I was so fired up last night that I'm talking during the credits, pulled Instagram out. Like I felt the need. It was that need I felt like when we started the podcast of I have to say something about this. Like I have to tell somebody. So I turned on Instagram right away. And the first thing on Instagram is I just laugh. And it wasn't forced. That was me just pure joy, just laughing like, oh my gosh, did you guys see this? And I didn't even really say anything. I was just like, oh my gosh, I love it. And that's not faked. That is how much I loved my experience last night. It was just, I immediately went on Twitter, posted, and I tweeted at Justin Benson, said, you have to come on the show. And he liked our tweet, for the record. I immediately emailed Charlie Cox's management, Iman Vellani, which has nothing to do with this management, and Benson and Moorhead.
We just got to chat with Iman. Just like bro, come on.
It's probably some stuff that I'm going to regret later, but I just on the whim at 11 o'clock, and I was like, please come on the show right now. So we'll see what happens. But that's my point is that's how much energy I'm taking
under the influence of Daredevil. You know
exactly
this. We talked about this.
We've been over this like 3 times. I truly think the last time, I think I felt that way probably 2 other times. WandaVision pre-finale, like this one. 3 other times. Moon Knight episode 4 ending, and the Loki season 2 finale. Probably the Loki season 1 finale. So maybe 4 or 5 total time. This would be a top 5 Disney Plus episode for me.
Yeah, I would say like in some ways that because of the placement within the season, it reminded me of the like spaghetti episode of Loki season 2. Just the kind of like the shock factor of the ending, the like what on earth, the like uneasiness and like there's like a like this is more it's less sad than that is, and it's more intense. But yeah, I do think like this team. Like this episode for me was on a different tier than the first episode, for instance. I don't know if you like, I feel like I wasn't as like insanely hyped about the premiere as some other people, like as compared to the other episodes. But this one to me seems like a step up.
Yeah, this one was better, but it was a similar feeling to my screener of just being back in the world. It had a different, it was a different time. Yeah. It was 8 weeks ago. It was getting into it.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, there's so much I'm going to get into on that in 2 seconds. I have one thing I want to say that has nothing to do with this, and then we have to say, at the end of this episode, we have our friends, the Newton Brothers, coming back on the show.
Yeah,
so
we do.
All of your musical questions, all of this musical discussion, all your musical dreams will be fulfilled at the end of this episode. So stay tuned for that. Can't wait for that conversation. It's actually happening for us a little bit later today. Thunderbolts, man, everything I am seeing about it, from the marketing, from the behind the scenes clips they released. I mean, did you see the marketing of at the CinemaCon, Red Guardian drove them all in the actual limo?
Yeah.
Like they were all in character.
Uh-huh.
Which is just a fun thing. It's very like Severance, like cubicle in Grand Central Station kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I think that worked really well for them. That fires me up. Here's what I'm going to say, though. Coming off this episode of Daredevil, I am so stoked for Thunderbolts and Fantastic Four. But the next thing, less than 3 weeks away, is Thunderbolts. And I feel like it's going to be such a banger in such a different way. Even the behind the scenes thing, the look at Florence Pugh actually jumping off a building is pretty crazy. That's like some Mission Impossible Tom Cruise type stuff.
Oh,
and
for sure.
What's crazy is that's the feel the trailer has to me.
Yeah.
Because they actually did it. They went there.
Yeah.
And that's like what that shot feels like.
No, it is like I feel like it is tailor made for you.
Like
the on location stunt stuff.
All right, here's the last thing we're gonna say. Austin, Texas listeners, we have some exciting news for you. I don't know how much of these details we can get into yet, but Saturday, what is it, Robbie? May 2? Help me out on that. Saturday, May 3. He's going to fact check me. Saturday after Thunderbolts comes out on a Thursday night.
Yeah, May 3rd.
We will have our podcast episode ready for you on Thursday night, but on May 3rd in the morning, and I'm not sure for how long, it's free comic book day, right? It's comic book stores across the country's biggest day of the year. Yeah. And your boys, Robbie and Kyle, are going to have a table at Austin Books and Comics where we will be doing some version of interacting with y'all, maybe even recording a live podcast episode at Austin Books and Comics outside under a tent. Mm-hmm. It's going to be unbelievable. So come check out the comic store for sure, but come say hi to us. This is your chance to maybe while we're recording, stop by and we can get you on a mic for a second. It'd be kind of a fun thing to see some of our listeners there. So how cool is that going to be? First ever live event, really, other than maybe the Doctor Strange viewing, which is kind of a live event. This is like an actual, we're talking at a live event.
And Austin Books and Comics is my home comic book store, but it's also known around the country as one of the best comic book stores in the country. So it's a really fun, it's a treat to be there on Free Comic Book Day, which a lot of people have probably never even heard of, but it is an annual thing that, like, the comics market is so unique from others where it's like you can't walk into a grocery store and pick up a single issue of a comic. You can't even really walk into like a Barnes and Noble and do that. So it's like, if you want to buy issues of comics, physical ones, you have to go to comic book stores. And so it's sort of like what like record stores will have with Record Store Day, where it's just this, like, the big publishers will put out free issues of comics. There's normally like a Spider-Man issue that fits in with Amazing Spider-Man, or like Avengers, or like a big event preview, but it's totally free. There's a ton of, like, every publisher puts out at least a few, including some of the indie publishers often. So you can show up and walk away with just a bunch of actual free comics. But also, you know, there's a bunch of other stuff there. There are prizes that Austin Books and Comics will be giving away,
and maybe even your boys giving some stuff away.
Yeah, yeah. So that it's gonna be really fun for a lot of reasons, and we will be talking about that more in the coming weeks. But for now, save the date. If you're in the Texas area and want to make a comic book store trip, then we got you.
And personally, I'm just looking forward to it because this is going to be the most amount of time we've spent together, because I think I'm going to be there from a Tuesday to Saturday. So we're going to be watching the film together, maybe watching it again on Friday night, potentially in Austin, and then recording a ton of episodes on Wednesday and Thursday and getting some stuff ready for y'all. And then this live event on Saturday. And this is hopefully just a teaser of what might happen around July time too. And that's all I'm going to say. That's all I'm going to say. So much to do today, no time. But Austin, Texas people, start getting that in your mind. Okay, here's how I want to start. You know, we started this podcast series with Daredevil doing this kind of big three thing. We did that for Captain America 2. Captain America as well, not Captain America 2. I want to start with the Benson and Moorhead side of this all, because I have a couple of hot takes real quick. I saw a lot of feedback online. There are some people on Twitter, and I talked about this on our Discord, that weren't loving the show, that loved this episode. And I thought this episode was so spectacular. And for those of you who don't know, this is an episode that is directed by Benson and Moorhead. The finale's directed by them as well. And the first episode, I believe, was directed by them.
Right.
And here's where I'm at. I don't think it belittles what happened the rest of the season to say that this was a step up. It also should give you hope for season 2, because I think this is going to be the team that's running the whole second season.
Yeah.
But also, I think it's a little bit crass to just say that everything else, like, nothing, like we can't act like the rest of the season didn't happen. It very much mattered. In fact, I think that there are still a lot of things that wouldn't have had the payoff here if you hadn't had some of that other stuff. It's not all of a sudden this was a new season. I mean, we needed all the Heather development. We needed the rise of Fisk and Matt at the same time and them fighting their other nature. We needed to see all of that stuff for this to pay off. But that being said, once Benson and Moorhead got a chance to pay it off, they just have a unique ability in their filmmaking techniques. Like, not just the writing anymore, but the actual techniques are different. The use of color. Like, do you notice how Bullseye is a lot of times in this bluish hint? Yeah. And then they did that with Loki. There was some really strong greens and some strong yellows, and the use of color, the use of the camera to show you techniques of Matt processing, like that he's listening and he's not listening to Heather. He's focusing on this conversation. They do lens stuff and zooming. Yeah. And then techniques they do from like the first shot of the flower upside down. So you start realizing that's what Bullseye, how his life looks. And there are just a lot of things like that from like a filmmaking perspective that they are next level. And it's very similar to what they did in Loki and with Moon Knight episode 4. Yeah. Because there were things in that same thing, the camera spinning like, doo, 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 like they clearly have like a stamp. It's a stamp that I absolutely love. They have a gritty film lens type stamp that they put on like Loki season 2. We talked about how Loki season 2 looked a little grainier. It looked a little more tangible in what the TVA felt like. You could touch those machines, it felt like. There's just something about their attention on that front that is next level. And I'm ready for them to do whatever they want in the MCU. I know that sounds crazy, but give them any kind of budget. And I really think they could do it now.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder, like, I don't know if, like, have they done any film work, or is it mostly TV?
No, they've done some indie stuff, but you keep talking and I'll fact check because I've talked a lot.
No, well, yeah, and I'm looking here. Okay, yeah, I'm aware of some of these. I think it's
but for sure this is like a bigger deal now for them.
Well, and I guess I would say, like, there's a part of me that's like, give them more movies within the MCU, but there's another part of me that, like, we've found somebody or people that understand how to do a certain type of Disney Plus show, like a Marvel show. And I think that's such a, we talked about this the other day when we were talking about kind of the trajectory of the MCU and how people look back on phases 4 and 5. And I think one of the big takeaways for me is, like, they've been experimenting, trying to figure out how to run a show in the same way that they run movies. Like, they had that formula down, not plot wise, but production wise. Like, you have the writers that kind of work closely with Feige and his team. They bring in the director, and it's kind of this vision, and Feige's hands off. But then once everything's done, initially he comes in and they talk about what's there and what else needs to be there and what should be reshot. So it's this very, like, hands-on thing that the studio heads are very creatively involved in. And I think that one of the weird things about the initial transition to Disney Plus is that, like, that's just not how TV normally works. Like, TV, you don't have one set of like directors or a director and then like a writer or two and then collaborate like in that way, because you can't, because you have too many episodes and that's just not practical. And of course, like, from a time perspective, like, Kevin Feige can't do that with like each episode of a television series. So it's like, I think that they've struggled at times to figure out who slots in and who can be for the TV side what the Russos were for the movie side, when you just kind of saw, like,
that's right.
You saw Joss Whedon figure out how to, like, put his creative stamp on the MCU, but I think the Russos whether you like this or not, were the ones that figured out how to work within the kind of corporate environment of the MCU and be really effective and still do things that are like I think it's important to note that you can work well within a corporate environment and also make really good things. Like sometimes those are set forward as like diametrically opposed. But so I look at this and I look at what they've done now on 3 different projects that all have 3 different feels, and the way that they understand the rhythm of TV, which I think is a very different thing from understanding, like you talk about Falcon and Winter Soldier, like the rhythm of a movie. So it's like I hope that they can become like
that's a good point.
The go-to Disney Plus guys. If Marvel's going to continue to try to invest a lot in that platform for storytelling stuff.
That's a good point. Maybe instead of giving them a movie, just give them whatever project on the Disney Plus front that they want.
I mean, I would love to see like Benson and Moorhead, Jack Schaefer collaboration. Like I think that would be really fun. And like there's a lot of potential there, which also leads me like I don't want to leave out Dario, the showrunner and writer of both the writer on the first episode and these last 2 episodes, because the actual writing and plot developments, I think he should get a fair amount of credit for as both like reshaping the show's direction and the actual nitty gritty of this one. But the whole team, I thought everything was just clicking. In episode 8.
It was fun to see some of the reaction from the creators online last night because they were promoting the show. And like, for example, I saw the editor post, tonight's episode is the best thing I've ever worked on.
Wow.
And like Dario saying some of that kind of stuff. And then they were highlighting the interview that they did with Brandon Davis, Charlie Cox, and Vincent D'Onofrio, where they were asked, like, what are they most excited for people to see? And they're like, I think episode 8. And then Vincent, it's like, I mean, 9 is good too. It's hard to say that, but
yeah.
Just basically it's fun to see them be so proud of their work because they should be. They should be. It was that freaking good to me.
Well, especially for it to be like, with, again, and we've talked about how this was kind of overblown, but a lot of the narratives around Brave New World, they were this like, it's troubled production, it's been reshot, it's been stitched together. And we talked about how there were certain elements of that movie that did feel that way. Like it felt like, this was shot kind of later in the game and put in. And I think this is the show where that is like the truest. Like it's literally... It's documented that they like pivoted midway through, brought in a whole new team and changed all this stuff. And so, we've talked about how you can feel those moments, but what's really impressive, like I was talking to Candace last night. I should have thought about this last week when we were talking about the Muse battle. And I said, it almost feels like that would have been the finale. I wonder if it was like, if it was supposed to be not necessarily the final episode, but like, I don't know how much of that was in there before. Like how much was...
remember originally it was also like 18 episodes. So I don't know if they were just going to keep rolling into what is now the second season. It would just kept trucking along.
True,
maybe.
True.
I don't.
But what I think is interesting is like this, it's like creatively fascinating to me that they were able to take these existing episodes, 6 existing episodes that had been shot, and rather than redo those or like painfully like re-edit them in a way that feels like jarring, the idea of just putting a new premiere in front of them and then 2 new episodes at the end to bookend it's genius, because you can actually keep you can keep that stuff. And I don't want to say it's filler, but like the middle episodes as like a way to just kind of let tension build in the background and have time in like the daily parts of Matt's life, see Matt doing well, like we've said,
which we're often asking for in other mediums. Yeah.
I think it's this fascinating look at how much just the framing can change the way you view everything, because by opening up with the episode that they did with like Foggy's death and Matt's decision based on that and the stuff with Bullseye, like we've been asking the whole season, like, what's going on with that? Like, what's going on with Bullseye? Is he going to come back? And like, that is like, they didn't have to shoot like new Bullseye things in the midst of the season.
Right.
It's a really smart way to do that.
It is. And here's an example of one scene that I freaking loved. And to your point, it wouldn't have existed without the rest of the show. But by putting something in the beginning and the end, it ties it all together. I loved Matt's life's falling apart. He's late to work again. And they're trying to take on this other client who's just a jerk and robbing teachers. And Matt snapping on that guy.
Yeah.
And I loved it. I wrote down, like, I love hearing Matt raise his voice and basically being like, get out of here. And then he goes outside and Kirsten confronts him. And I love that line. That's all they had to add in, where he's like, look, this all feels, I'm going to write it down. He said, we're not saving justice here. We're babysitting chaos. All this, it's all useless.
Yeah.
And it's like, we wouldn't have that feeling if we didn't see the Hector Ayala trial go wrong, the Muse thing go wrong. If we didn't see, all this stuff, Fisk rising to mayor, and it's just like
the plea deal, like the guy he talks about that's going to prison for stealing snacks. Him being able to quick rattle those off. I was like, oh yeah, we have done a lot of those things already. It hasn't been working. I mean, and then also a lot of this wasn't working going back to the Netflix series either for Matt. So that frustration kind of boiling to the top felt so perfect. And to your point, they didn't have to redo the whole thing. They just had to include that scene and be like, oh yeah, he has had a lot of stuff fail already. How much of that, doesn't that remind you of what, again, this pairing, whether it's like them and Dario, or, again, I like their work with a lot of different writers that we've seen in the MCU. So I think that there is a level of Benson Moorhead oversight there, but it reminds me so much of Endgame and how we now look back on, you talked about this last week, we look back on so many projects in the Infinity Saga more fondly than we would have if Endgame had not gone back and reframed them for us. And I think this is that in a microcosm where again, we were digging those episodes along the way. So I'm not trying to rewrite history, but I think that just moments like that where it explains, it ties them together, retroactively in a way that is now more powerful. And also, by the way, in a way that's a little bit whenever I kind of criticized that Fisk conversation with Buck in the last episode, where it was just I see what they're trying to do, but it just doesn't quite hit for me. This is an example of how I what I was looking for, I think, where it's it doesn't feel forced. It doesn't feel like Matt's trying to recap anything. It feels like a really natural next step from what they were already doing. And that's why, I would be fascinated to see what the original version did look like and how much they just came in and gave it a natural next step and how much it's a pure pivot. But I think it's it is such a sign of them being a good fit for this particular kind of property.
And you know what else I just realized when you're talking? I think that was it. I think I realized we just crossed the threshold that I always talk about last night. I was using Thunderbolts as the marker, but I think last night's episode is the final time I think we're going to have these questions of what happened during this era and did this have to get for all of Marvel, I mean. Because Brave New World still had that lingering thought, and remember, and it's Brave New World is the one they probably still couldn't have canceled after it happened. But I always said from Thunderbolts on, it's officially the Feige team with the chance of reframing. How are we going to do this? It's not we have to fulfill all the projects we announced. We're going to change the way we think of it. But really, it's probably last night's episode. I think last night and the finale of next week are kind of the restarted, this is what we have to do post the strikes. And that's only going to carry on into Thunderbolts and Fantastic Four. Are you kidding me? You think Fantastic Four is going to be a bad movie? Oh, it's going to be unbelievable.
I think my only question mark is Ironheart right now, which I don't want to get into, but that's the one that I think is also from that era. That so here's my
You're so right. You're so right. Because they're still honoring that that's a show. Whereas even I think Vision Quest, they've had time to really think about it. I do wonder though, don't you think at this point with all the stuff going on that they could have just canceled Ironheart?
I mean, I don't
So
know.
we don't need to get into that, but I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, that'll be an interesting thing to talk about after this is wrapped and after Thunderbolts, because we'll have a bit. But
yeah, because we're even hearing stuff about Wonder Man that's like, this is so different and fun, and it's going to be really good. And we've heard stuff about Vision Quest. Armor Wars got canceled because of this. Like, that was a casualty.
Yeah.
But yeah, Ironheart's still there. So either it's the last project, like you're talking about, that's kind of like, oh, they had to do it because they were, they already committed, or it's actually really great.
Yeah.
And they had a chance to cancel it and they decided not to.
Yeah. I mean, which I would like, again, there has been enough time where I would think that they could do that.
Okay. Here
talking
we go.
about the plot here, like the substance of it.
Hold on. We'll be right back from a quick word from our sponsors here.
So I love, and I've said this a couple times during this season, I love this look at Matt Murdock. Like it feels so accurate to the way he's depicted frequently in the comics. And that's not real. Like, again, I don't think that is always the goal or even like a necessary thing. I think the comics are one thing and the shows and movies are another thing. But
it's just fun. It's an added bonus.
Yeah. I think it is this, like a guy that is trying so hard, that's so smart and successful, and like could just be like at the upper echelons of society. Like he's consistently known as like one of the best lawyers in New York City, but he's always got this pull. And even setting aside like the interesting kind of moral quandaries there, I love this. Like he is at, like, more than any other Marvel character, self-destructive. Like he is always this guy that like you just want him to just like let it go and like do the easy thing, and he can't, and he always winds up blowing up his life in one way or the other. And that's why those comics are always so fascinating, because you see different creators figure out different ways to make him blow up his life. But you haven't seen that through the entire series. And then it's like, it's reminiscent of the Netflix stuff, but it feels like weirdly more earned here, because to your point, like we haven't really gotten that many moments within the Netflix series where we saw it working well. So it was like, we only ever saw Matt kind of as a mess, but now you see what it looks like when he has this practice going with Kirsten and things are going well. And she's not used to this version of him in the way that like Karen and Foggy were. And now she's like having the same concerns where she's like, I don't even recognize you. Like you're showing up late. You're like yelling at our clients.
And Heather.
Yeah.
Same
yeah.
thing.
And like, it's even the, like you start to see him make decisions where you understand them, and it's not even necessarily the wrong decision, but you want to like pull him back, where it's like, if you had told Heather right after the Muse fight. I know. Right when
you maybe wouldn't let her mind start like going down this trail.
But now,
and you could explain oh gosh, dude, I have chills. I loved it so much. Okay. Here's the two things that I love. You just talk about that. One, this entire season, I'm literally getting emotional. I'm so excited. This entire season has been this really cool, well done look at this parallel storyline between Matt and Daredevil, and then Fisk and Kingpin, and this idea of embracing your true nature. To your point, bringing back the very first episode again, or the second episode.
Yeah.
Where they are both doing well, and yet they can't fight off who they truly are. And so to start this episode with shot by shot, just like the Muse fight, which I've loved this whole series, but shot by shot, to go back and forth between Matt's life unraveling. Like Buck is showing up at his door. How do you know that she's here? And then I have chills. He hasn't told Heather So it's like, at this point, I'm like, dude, you gotta just tell her that she is actually in danger because of this, and this is why.
Yeah.
And then Heather is starting to really second guess her relationship with Matt, but she also is outwardly saying, like, Daredevil didn't save me, which is a little bit like, come on, Heather, by the way, BS.
Right.
Like, you didn't do it. Okay. But she's growing jaded about like vigilantes, just like Fisk is.
Yeah.
She's wanting to go to Fisk's party and not understanding what Matt is like. So that is literally going shot for shot with Fisk and Vanessa getting over their problems and killing Adam, which is super dark. But it's the exact opposite. It's like they are actually doing well. They're starting to fully get like on the same team. They are taking control of New York. They're getting all the power back that Vanessa wanted.
Yeah.
They're throwing balls, and people know this is a bad dude, but we can't do anything about it anymore. It's like the end of season 3, like where he had gotten.
Yeah.
But Matt, at the same time, is losing everything. Kirsten is pissed off at him. His job, he doesn't like the clients. It's not working a job. And now Heather is doubting vigilantes, calling them cowards. They're just boys, immature boys in masks.
That scene
and Matt is
was
sitting
so
right there
good.
going like, no, I think they're different. And she's like, no, they're not.
Well, it
and it's like he hasn't told
like,
her, and it's going shot for shot, dude. It's just like,
it's the same. Like it you know, I think it's intentionally reminiscent, but it's whenever like Karen, before she knows who Matt is in season 2, is comparing Daredevil to the Punisher, and it like gets under his skin so much. But it's so much worse here because at least the Punisher is trying to do the right thing. Like Muse is a legitimate serial killer, and she's just automatically putting them in the same bucket.
She says, no, Daredevil was there for himself.
Yeah, it's like, and then the like again when she's like, you weren't there. I'm like, Matt, if you would just like, I get why he doesn't. Like, it's like once he lets that secret out, he doesn't have control over it.
I know.
But that's the other thing about this episode that I loved is like we finally see now, like Vanessa knows, you know, obviously.
I know. I wrote it again. Matt, come clean to Heather. It's time, like, dude. Now the risks outweigh the benefits at this point.
Yeah.
Of telling her.
So before we get to the
risk of not telling her. You get what?
Right? Yeah. No. Before we get to like the final black tie scene,
I want to talk about okay, hold on. I had 2 things. The only other thing I was going to say is I love that the episode ends with Matt getting shot, and the episode was still so powerful. I like the power didn't come from, there was no part of it that's like, oh, Matt's actually going to die. We know season 2 is happening. There's no way they do it. And yet it still really, really worked. And this is what I love. We talked so much about what else do they have left to do. I love that because he's been shot, I don't think the finale is going to be any version of him like suiting up, beating up Fisk and stopping him. Right? There's no way. He's now going to be coming off a bullet injury. So my point is, I think the finale is going to be what I wanted, which is they're going to leave it in a spot of Fisk might be at the height of his power.
Yeah.
They might end it with Matt being the most broken and the Fisk mayor stuff being the height of it working, which is what gets me really excited. And also Foggy's going to come back in the finale, isn't he?
I mean,
the last second shot's going to be Foggy walks in.
I mean, we definitely know now that Vanessa was behind all this.
Right, exactly. And she says to Wilson, there's something I want to tell you. And he says, not right now, which I'm sure she's going to say that. Like, Foggy's actually not dead. Or I did hire him.
I think it was at least that. I'm just trying to figure out within the context of the show, what would be the possible rationale for faking Foggy's death.
Yeah, right.
As opposed to just killing him.
And also I think the other twist that was crazy to me is they went to kill Bullseye. They weren't trying to break Bullseye out to be part of the vigilante team. They tried to kill him.
Yeah. Yeah.
They were actually going to kill him. And he actually went to Matt for help.
And that's the scene I want to talk about. So
you take over, but then we'll get to we'll keep going.
So first, I mean, I love that. I love the whole setup of that scene. I've said this before all through our season 3 watch. I think that this iteration of Bullseye is so great and so well done and so perfectly suited for the like universe, the whether it's the Netflix universe or just Daredevil show. But like, because you see him thinking like he's a former FBI agent. He's not, like, he doesn't belong here with these criminals that are like shouting like he's talking about the jungle, and you kind of
Rikers,
you don't sympathize with him.
I know,
but you see his perspective.
For a second, I was like, man, maybe help him. Which is like, no, that's Bullseye. What are you doing?
And like it's. And, again, I think part of the genius of that character is I look back at season 3 and I think how, like he is a person with like a mental disorder that has tried to be good. Like he took on the FBI job because he wanted to be good and useful and not destructive. And Fisk ruined his life. Like Fisk took hold of him and used him and discarded him and then tried to have him killed. And it's like that is, or Vanessa tried to have him killed, whoever put that order in. But he's like, you do see, okay, yeah, he's not this like, I'm just an evil person and I want to get out there and like hurt everybody. He is like a confused guy that is also like.
But he still did go kill Foggy on a shooting rampage. And so what's his reason? But to your point, was he hired? Like what? Why? And why does he feel like he's still innocent then on that front?
And why not kill?
Unless
Matt?
He didn't kill him actually.
Like, though. But like, if that's what Vanessa was doing, because my sense is okay, Fisk is gone. We clearly saw that she had her own vision for the organization and was making these calls generally effectively. If she's thinking, okay, I know that Matt Murdock is Daredevil. Daredevil is out there still doing vigilante stuff, and that could interfere with my business. Why kill Foggy to try to get Daredevil to stop rather than just kill Daredevil?
Well, unless the plan was to get them all. Unless the plan was to shoot Foggy, then walk up, shoot Karen, assume Daredevil would show up, and then shoot him. Maybe? Yeah,
that's fair. I mean, because
Bullseye, it got stopped.
I mean, Bullseye was trying to kill. Like, I think
he says hello, Karen.
Well, and and if Matt had not fought, like if my sense is that if Matt had not won that fight, Bullseye would have killed him. So I guess maybe that was the intention.
Yeah. So
and then Matt just gave it up. But then
why
anymore.
Fake it though? So then what would be the reasoning behind? Okay, let's say Vanessa wants all of them off the board. She wipes them all out. Why fake it? That's the part that I can't figure out. Maybe next week we'll know. But
yeah, I mean, to me, I can't tell. I don't know. I can't tell what I want. I think if they pull it off well, and I kind of trust them to at this point, it would be interesting. I think it would be good to have. There is a good dynamic between Foggy and Matt. Like I know we've talked about whether that's fully necessary. I do think he's a character that tends to ground Matt. And I think that there's something that a best friend can do in that regard that a love interest can't. Like there's a comfort there, and like Foggy kind of consistently pulls Matt back and is sort of like the angel on one side of his shoulder. But at the same time, I just can't that would be such a strange thing,
right? Unless
for them
there's
to explain.
Yeah. There could be some legitimate reason. I can't think of it right now, but it doesn't mean there's not.
Up until the shot at the end, I halfway thought that Matt intentionally, like whenever he like head slams Bullseye, part of me thought he did that knowing that he was like going to wind up giving him a way to get out, because the whole thing with Matt is as unbelievable as that sounds. So. Well, no, I said I halfway thought.
Okay.
Don't rebuke relax. Past me.
I just said I don't think so, but keep going. Jeez, I didn't
finishing my journey. Jeez.
Okay, sorry.
I'm still scarred from the mouth fart, so it's all fresh. It's like
the question is, did Bullseye anticipate that happening?
I don't think so. I don't think either of them did. But there was a part of me that Bullseye saying, "If you get me out of here, I'll talk," and I thought maybe that was Matt being like, "Okay, I'm going to basically give you the opportunity to get out." And then I thought he was going to go as soon as Poindexter got out, grab him and then interrogate him and try to Punisher style get information out of him. But obviously that's not what happened, because he would not have let him get to a place where he could hurt people, especially Heather, because that is why he jumped in front of Fisk, right? Like he thought that Heather was in the line of fire.
I don't know. Or was it a message from Poindexter where he says, that's what heroes do or good people do. They defend their worst enemies. And I didn't know if that was Matt realizing that, like, after all of this breaking, that maybe the thing to do is defend his worst enemy. That, or he was trying to protect Heather. I don't know. But here's what's so freaking good about that scene. I haven't felt my elevated heart rate like this in a while. Like the whole episode, for some reason, it was like Severance, where there was so much tension that my heart is just kind of beating a little bit faster than it should. And not like a ton of stuff was happening, but that whole last dinner party sequence, I was so tense because you still don't know who he's even aiming at. Yeah. And I actually saw an interview about this, and I get it entirely. Like the whole time, Matt hears the gun cock and you get the cool visual effect. But then you're like, is he trying to kill Matt? Because that would make sense. He's got a history with Matt, and Matt just slammed his head on the table.
Yeah.
Is he trying to kill Fisk? Because Fisk ruined his life, But is he trying to kill Vanessa because Vanessa was the one that hired him? Or is he going to kill Heather just to torment Matt? I truly didn't know. That was the part. So like, I'm not getting the rush from Matt taking the bullet as much, which is still an awesome thing.
Yeah.
But for me, it was more the rush of like, oh my gosh, I don't know who he's going to shoot here. And honestly, any of them outside of maybe Matt dying was kind of believable.
Yeah. Yeah. I think
I thought for a second there's the chance he's killing Vanessa, like gonna actually kill her.
Yeah, I thought that too.
Or Heather. And either way, just absolutely send the other person off. But then honestly, shooting Fisk makes the most sense when you think about it. He ruined his life more than anything.
Well, and I do think you have to remember, like Bullseye is like he doesn't miss, and so I think the only reason, like going back to like the Colin Farrell movie, like the thing about Daredevil that drives Bullseye crazy is he can, because of his senses, like anticipate these trajectories and make him miss. So I do think that looking at that. I mean, he had no reason to go for Heather. I don't think Bullseye knows enough about Heather. So I think he was going for Fisk. But I think that Matt, just because, they're dancing, and Matt doesn't know it's Bullseye necessarily. He just knows that someone's about to shoot. So I think my sense is like he acts sort of reactively and instinctively. But the thing that worked about that for me, like as a Daredevil comics nerd, like there are two. So the Charles Soule run, there's a big moment in his Mayor Fisk arc where Fisk gets, like, there's an attempted assassination and he is shot like at a public rally type thing, and he's like the thought as he's going to die. There are several issues where he's essentially comatose, and what comes out of that, like in that run, Fisk has made Matt Murdock his deputy mayor because it's kind of this act of like they've been known to have public feuds, and it's him sort of reaching across the aisle and trying to instill legitimacy. And so whenever Fisk gets shot in the comics, Matt actually becomes like acting mayor of New York for that period. And I was sitting trying to figure out, like, are they doing, obviously he's not deputy mayor in the show, but are they doing something where they like play with that attempted assassination? Or there's another piece of these recent comics where like Matt almost dies and then has to kind of recover from that. And I think it's maybe both. But the other interesting thing that I can't get out of my head is like Matt, whenever he becomes like acting mayor, there's this long standing thing where, because as mayor, he defends the city from an attack, yada, yada, where he's like the hero mayor. And I'm just thinking like, everything's going so well for Fisk. He's got so much control. Like Matt's life is spinning out. But now Matt has like very publicly saved Fisk's life, which Fisk is going to hate. And is that going to lead to him like feel like in the same way that he has used Heather and others to try to like legitimize his own like policies and organization? Is he going to do that now with Matt and give Matt like this position like within the administration and try to elevate him and try to use him? Or is he gonna just like lash out and try to get rid of him. If Matt, assuming that Matt bounces back relatively quickly.
Or do you think there's any chance that he actually feels some kind of gratitude, or like is more lenient on mapping Daredevil because he saved his life? That's not how Fisk thinks, I guess. But
I do think when Fisk figures out the full situation with Vanessa, especially after that scene with Adam, where he's like putting all the cards on the table, and when he realizes that she's kept all this from him and that it's all resulted in this moment, I can't tell if he's going to be impressed because
she still had a chance to tell him at that Adam sequence and didn't still.
Yeah. It's like, is he, I guess my question is, do you think Fisk is happy, or like I said that it would get under his skin, Matt saving him, but do you think that he's happy with this result as of now? Like, because there's a potential that Matt could no longer be an issue because he could just be dead. Or do you think he's going to be unhappy because there have been things going on out of his control and now it's created this entire like situation that he has to deal with?
Yeah, I don't know.
He seems like he's getting more hostile again.
Yeah. And I think he wouldn't be happy about Vanessa not telling him everything, even though he loves her.
Yeah.
I don't think he'd be like, dang, that's impressive. You kept it from me. I think it'd be more like, I just came clean to you and you didn't.
I think he would be impressed more by just the like pulling it off in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
But that's my other question. Do you think that like, I mean, I guess they said that the decision to release Bullseye into General Pop was from Mayor Fisk. Do you think that that's accurate, or was it actually from Vanessa
Fisk?
Just like
I think it was Vanessa via Buck. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, because if that's the case, then I mean, it doesn't like, why would Mayor Fisk do that? Like, why would
when Wilson Fisk in the second episode said to Matt, I had nothing to do with Foggy, I think he was telling the truth. And I think he still isn't. He doesn't understand how that's like a part of this. I still think.
Yeah.
Like Vanessa did that all on her own. She used Buck to try to get Bullseye killed naturally. Then when that didn't work, they were like, well, let's kill him. Just hire someone to kill him.
Yeah.
And that didn't work. And that's when she was like, I got to tell you something.
And I love that, like, don't you love that now because Fisk knows that it's Matt? Like, he knows that, like, he can, like, whisper around Matt and he knows that he can hear him. So, like, when she's starting to tell him something, he's like, no. Like,
I told you there'd be consequences, he says, like, real quietly.
It's like...
Dude, there was so much tension when Matt was saying to Heather, like, when Matt was getting mad at Heather. Like,
dude, that
he's using, you don't think he knows this. She's like, what are you talking about? He's just the mayor. But he can't say it.
Yeah, but although it is crazy to me because it's like they talk about how it's knowledge, at least like whether it's common, it's known that he was a lead suspect in the murder of Ben Urich.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think she's still uneasy about it. She's not like, yes, I got an invite from the mayor, but not uneasy enough, according to Matt.
Well, and like, I've been impressed with the way that they've shown the special hearing and all that throughout the show. But the thing that was so genius here, it's sort of like what we started talking about on our Friends from Work Plus episode, talking about The Last of Us Part 2, where it's like the using the medium in such a way that really, like, it's not just putting you in their shoes, it's kind of making you feel the, like, all the same instincts and pulls, and like the fact that we actually can't hear what Heather's saying, and then she'll be like, are you even listening to me? And he's like, yeah, for sure. And then he's like zones out again and is listening to, and you as the audience want more to hear what Fisk is saying than what Heather's saying, because you're also trying to figure out what's going on with Fisk. And so you feel where Matt's coming from, but you're also mad at Matt because he is like torpedoing this relationship that's a good thing. And
it's
it's not fair to Heather.
It's legitimate writing. Like it's been like a decently slow burn that they introduced that a couple episodes ago that she's like, what's going on? You're distant and
Yeah.
blah, blah, blah. And now, rapid fire, like five things or so real fast. I loved watching Matt and Charlie Cox's performance of him just losing it. Like, I don't know how often we've seen him lose it as Daredevil or like have like a primal scream, all that stuff. But to watch Matt, like I said, with that client, like for example, if you go back and look, first of all, in the original series, there's very little language. We talked about that. There's
right.
a ton of violence, but no sex and no language. Here, there's more language for sure. But you never hear Matt say F you to somebody. Like you hear Matt be like, you maybe say a couple things when he's getting beat up or something, but it's never like directed at somebody. Yeah. And so for him to like 2 or 3 times this episode, like when Bullseye says like, I'm surprised you came here. I'm thankful you came. Or I respect you for coming. He goes, oh, F you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, whoa, Matt, like even that's where I'm like a little bit chill out. And then like the way Matt smashes his head and then does the whole like, oh, counselor, he's smashing his head is so kind of like cruel.
Yeah.
But
it's like justified,
Like, that's my point though. Like Matt is losing it. And I loved hearing him raise his voice. I loved hearing him just be like real honest with Kirsten. Like this is all stupid. This is all useless. None of this, he's in a dark place.
Yeah.
And I liked him being real and getting aggressive with Heather. And then I also love that, to our point about that conversation, Heather doesn't understand why Matt thinks he's so important to this scenario. Like she understands that Fisk has got a gray area past, but she doesn't understand why Matt's like, he's doing this to get after me, or like, how do you think he knows I live here? And she's like, why would he care about where you live or why you're invited? She doesn't know that part. So she's like, well, you're so full of yourself that.
And he sounds like delusional. Like he sounds like,
because he'll be like, I have to go talk to him. She's like, we're not going to interrupt him at this party. He's like, trust me. Like, and she's like, what are you talking about? He's not going to listen to you.
It's like if the mayor of Austin came to my house and invited Candace to some event, and I was like, wait, how does the mayor of Austin know where we live?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, you would sound like a crazy person. Like, why is this the reaction? But because he has not given her any peek into that, because he didn't have to, because he wasn't Daredevil for the longest time.
And I think that's where when he's sensing that she's starting to turn jaded and he might lose everything, I get it. It's the fear that if he tells her, she may die, not just break up, but she may die. But it's like, at that point, you got to be like, here's the thing. This is why I can't have you go, I think. And you can't tell anybody. We already said we love each other. Okay. We're kind of committed to this relationship. Here's the problem. I'm Daredevil, and I have this huge history with Wilson Fisk. He's Kingpin, and we've gone through all this, and he killed my best friend, and I'm trying to do the right thing, but I don't know how to balance. Like that's the time to say, I'm really struggling with this, Do
you think that Bullseye knows?
Bullseye knows what?
Who Matt is?
Does Bullseye know who Matt is?
Because he has a line where he's like, I actually have some questions for you. And you think about it, like, it would be kind of hard for him to not know, based on, like, he was there for the final fight with Fisk, and he went and
he must have
killed
overheard.
Foggy, and
we talked about that. He must have, while he was laying paralyzed on the ground, overheard Matt talk to Fisk and say, like, I'll go after Karen and Foggy. Like, you remember that's like the connection, surely.
Yeah. I mean, I would, like, if he's just sitting there in prison, you have to imagine him putting those together. Although you also could see him like using that as leverage against Matt whenever he's trying to get out of jail, to be like, if you.
The thing that Matt has going for him as far as keeping his identity hidden is just that he's blind, right? So it's like an extra level of no one suspects it. I think with Spider-Man, it's always kind of funny when it's like, 3 friends are hanging out. A villain attacks, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, where's Peter? 2 seconds later, Spider-Man swings in. They're like, oh, thank God Spider-Man's here. Yeah. We got to tell Peter. Where did Peter get,
Right.
At some point, it's a little bit like, don't you think somebody would ask? If you ever watched Spidey and His Amazing Friends, I think that all the time. Like, their parents don't know that and it's like, they'll be talking to them, and then all of a sudden they're gone. They're like, oh man, where'd Gwen go? But the thing that Matt has going for him as far as believability is that no one suspects that the blind guy would be able to do that. So even
Yeah,
like
yeah.
Josie here says like, oh, I didn't see him use a cane, which I love lines like that because it again reminds us that yes, he's blind and yes, people don't really know that he is Daredevil. It's not common knowledge, you know, to just say that. Whereas why Cherry's like, yeah, I didn't notice anything unusual. I love that they brought back the buzzy bee sound for Bullseye.
Yeah,
whenever Bullseye's turning back to kind of like whatever is a sociopath or psychopath, whatever one it is, when he's turning kind of into that mode, they do that buzzy bee sound from the Netflix series.
Yeah.
I also love the callback to Ben Urich directly saying my uncle, you know, he was the lead suspect, and that BB does know, and that she's maybe playing the long game in all this.
Yeah.
She's playing her friend. The whole thing is kind of like part of her plan.
So I had a question on that too. You saw like there was a little shot of Cole North like seeing that conversation.
Yeah, right.
But like I said, I think Cole is not like
crooked.
He's not. So like I want like I don't think that he's gonna report that in the way that like one of the other guys would.
I think he's trying to put it all together too.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that scene where they like put the guy's hand in the
fryer
grease, like that's
brutal, man.
And him just like flipping the bird to the police commissioner, like it there is something like really
that's very like Netflix season 3. That's very like Joker from Dark Knight. It's very like, what are you gonna do about it? And you're feeling as a viewer, he can't do anything about it.
Yeah, it's like I actually start to feel like, are they just gonna like they could probably just kill the police commissioner at this point?
And that's okay. Also love that they brought back Jack. And I feel like Jack as a swordsman is really working here.
Oh yeah.
Like this is working. Him being basically blackmailed by Fisk.
So what does that mean, you think? Because like he's like, even if you could show, like even if you could prove whatever you're saying, that would be an isolated incident. Is the idea that the swordsman like he would
stop her?
Well, but I guess my question is like, is he referring to the events of Hawkeye? Because he wasn't in like costume there, or is it something where like he's dressed up in his costume, but only like once, like in the city, or is he? Because like some of the videos made it seem like he's out there in the same way that White Tiger was.
I don't know.
I'm also
some people brought up like, why wouldn't he bring up Kate there? But you know what? If you go back to Hawkeye, he is probably single. Kate's probably not really in his life anymore because his fiance, I think it was, went to jail, right?
Yeah.
So there was a line in this episode where he's like, yeah, I'm single. I'm here by myself. Or it was something alluding to the fact that he's not with somebody, which I think is their way of then saying, oh yeah, he's not with her. Therefore, he's probably not really in Kate Bishop's life anymore.
Yeah, I think that's true. I don't think it, and you know, the reason why Fisk cares is because he can get money out of Jack. Whereas like, you know, I don't think Kate probably has that at this point. And
no. Sorry. I didn't mean like that, not money, but also like, would he bring up like blackmailing Kate as well? Like, I know who you're, you know, but your point,
like as leverage over Jack.
I think right now, Kate is just some random girl that had a bow and arrow to Kingpin.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I think he maybe knows that it's Eleanor's daughter, but again, like she's already in prison. So I don't think that he would know that Jack would care about her. But
anyways, I like seeing Jack. I like seeing a reference to Ben Urich. I like seeing the task force like be over aggressive. At least some of that dialogue. By the way, did you notice in that dialogue where he's naming the other guy, deputy mayor, kid mayor, the PR lady says like, I don't know if you mind this, but like, and he says this time he says like, I do mind. Yeah. She may be dead eventually is my fear. It's heading that direction.
Man, I'm really loving that character too. And every time I start to talk about him, I forget his name.
I know. So do I. Why am I forgetting his name? I'm not forgetting anyone's name on the show except for hers. Sorry, his. Yeah, his. Also the PR lady. Those are the two people I can't remember their names.
It's funny. Yeah, it's here we go. Daniel Blake.
Daniel. We knew that. He said
it's
that.
Yeah, because it's James Gandolfini's son, right?
But
Michael
it's also
Gandolfini.
just like it's a perfect look at earlier on, Fisk had to do all of the kissing babies and shaking hands. Like he was following everything the PR lady was saying, doing all these events, which again is why those other episodes were still important. He's dying inside about we built this city on rock and roll, all this stuff. And then this time she says, hey, we got to do something. Then he goes, literally cancel it. None of it matters.
Yeah.
The task force is all that matters. And then they're like, well, the task force is being a little over aggressive. And he's like, the over aggressive works.
Yeah.
And then he's like, I do mind you kind of speaking up. So it's just like, it's a perfect transition to how he goes from a guy who wants to like be different and be mayor to now like, I'm kingpin. I'm just in the mayor's chair.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, and even the line to Vanessa where she's like, why would you want to throw away everything we have? And he says like, I want to transform it. Like, it's not like, which is the first time he said something like that, where it's like, no, I'm still going to be kingpin. I'm just now also the mayor. Like now I'm making it look legitimate, not be legitimate.
Yeah. I loved it. That's all I have, other than I want to talk to the Newton brothers here in a second. So
same. Yeah. I mean, I'm curious, like, do we get Karen back in the finale here? Like, does she come into town if Matt's like on his deathbed?
I think so. That's my bold take, is I think that you're going to get Karen showing up because she's going to find out that Matt was shot. Not Daredevil, but Matthew was shot. She'll come back. Maybe she'll be the one to tell Heather why he's being shot. Maybe she tells him, by the way, you're getting involved with Daredevil. That's why.
Man.
You know what I mean? Like she spoils it potentially.
I feel like she wouldn't, but I wish that she would.
I think she might, with how dire the circumstances are for Matt.
Yeah, but like, I think she would want that secret to either die with him or to protect him. Like, I don't think her telling Heather would like. I
think we're gonna get another Foggy reference. Either the bold take is that he's in the last like shot of the show. The less bold take is that I think we're gonna get at least a little more resolution on the net, like what happened there.
I think that's right.
And I hope that the series is bold enough to end in the worst spot for Matt and the best spot for Fisk. I think a series like this with no resolution would be a huge win for me.
Especially with a greenlit season 2.
Especially with like Echo. Where they felt the very, like at the last second, they felt the need, like, we got to resolve this. Yeah. She has her powers. She gets through Fisk's mind, all this stuff. I think it'd be sick knowing Thunderbolts is coming, knowing Daredevil season 2 is coming, is that like it ends with Matt still injured and Fisk is tearing his life apart and he's a mayor and loving it. And I think I'll be I need next year,
That's the, like, think about the
Infinity War for Daredevil.
Well, and even just like the Disney Plus shows that have worked, like the finales that have worked, which are, I would argue,
both Lokis.
Well, I would just say, like, I think that the finales are the areas where those shows probably are weakest generally. Like, there are a lot of shows where it's like, it seems it's not a bad finale, but that's where people tend to say,
for the record, like, that's almost every show ever. People were finales are hard. Finales are hard. That's my point. I'm sorry.
But I do think with it's instructive to look at Loki, because Loki season 1 didn't feel the need to clean everything up. Loki season 1 intentionally, like, they knew they were greenlit, so they just let it be, like, let it hang out there. Or even if they didn't know they were greenlit when they made that call, they knew that they would be able to pick up those threads in a movie.
Yeah.
And I think, like, if you look at like people's complaints about whether it's WandaVision or Falcon Winter Soldier or Hawkeye or Moon Knight or whatever, it's often people feeling like there's a forced resolution, at least in one area. Like, there's something that is not totally. So I think, like, Loki is interesting because they didn't do that in season 1, which then gave them the opportunity to do that really meaningfully in season 2, which is a great resolution. So I'm with you. I think that like, that's the, like, those are the finales that I think people have been generally happiest with, is when they just don't feel the need to force anything there.
Okay. I'm not sure there'll be an outro after this, so I'm going to introduce them. The Newton brothers are musical composers. They are composing for Daredevil Born Again. And we got a chance to talk to them before on this podcast when they were doing X-Men 97.
Right.
So you can actually find that interview back when those episodes were coming out, which we thought they did an amazing job on. So I'm really excited to talk to them again here on their Daredevil Born Again work, especially since that we've talked to John Pizzino twice on this podcast, who composed the original Daredevil theme from the Netflix series, but they've also done a bunch of other like horror stuff. And I think that there are some really cool elements of that here and really helped added to the tension in this episode 8. I'm excited to see what they do at the finale, but we're excited to talk to them. And so after a quick word from these sponsors, you're going to hear from the Newton brothers. Thanks for listening. We'll see you on the other side of this break. Gentlemen, it's an honor to have you back on the show. Welcome back to Friends from Work, 2-time guests now.
Love it.
Honored. Thanks for having us back. Yeah, we're honored to be back twice. Yeah.
How long ago did you turn in the Daredevil Born Again score? I'm kind of curious about that because, you know, you're now talking about it, but has this been months since you turned it in?
Oh, boy. Yeah. I want to say it's been years since we started it and definitely many months since we turned it in. Wow. I'm trying to think exactly. We're in April. It's all a blur, but I feel like it was like last fall. Is that right, Taylor?
Wow.
Yeah, something like that.
Is there a difference between film and TV with that? Because I kind of wondered if, like, with film, you have to turn it in a certain amount of time ahead of time so they can get it to all the theaters. But with TV, could you theoretically tweak something like 2 weeks in advance or not?
Theoretically, I think you can push it a little bit further. Well, it depends on the movie, to be honest, too. You can push. We've been on some stuff that got wildly close to that was getting released in theaters. That was like a massive, like on the line. So I think it just depends on the project.
Interesting.
Visual effects sometimes slow things down. Or maybe a creative will want to make like a last minute like edit or change to something that they feel that needs to be changed. But yeah, I think this one, the thing about Marvel is they tend to bring you on really early, like way in advance, which is great because you can, develop themes and suites and ideas. And then sometimes on projects you come in last minute because maybe somebody was fired or something didn't work out. So it changes.
Yeah. How often do you find that something is pretty much ready, like you've got a scene scored or a whole episode scored, and then like, do you ever want to go back and tweak something yourself? Are you ever asked to, like, the scene's lengthened and now you need to go in and alter the track to some degree, or is that not really a common occurrence?
Yeah, that happens pretty often, actually. A lot of times things are developing, like, even as I think with technology, it's allowed the process to like keep going until the finish line in all departments, which I think ultimately usually serves the project pretty well because you're able to like figure out things that you didn't necessarily think would work or intend to do in every department. And it works nicely. It can be chaotic, but to that point, sometimes we'll need to, it can go a variety of ways. Sometimes we need to rescore a scene, lengthen a scene, shorten a scene. Sometimes a music editor, music editors are sort of the unsung heroes of like the final process of music, like they're the people who are taking the songs and the score and making sure like everything's dialed in. So like we have music editors who will sometimes, like, if we've already recorded the orchestra for a scene and they're like adding 12 frames, we'll like find 4 bars and can time stretch by like 12 frames, the entire thing. So that you'd never know. It's similar to like when the Beach Boys did, there were a couple tracks, but I don't know if it wouldn't it be nice? I think, wouldn't it be nice? I could be wrong.
Be nice.
That sounds
LA, LA and New York. Like I could be wrong on the song, but the chorus was recorded in New York and the verse was recorded in Los Angeles, and they stitched it together with tape. Yeah.
Wow.
So it's just interesting, like the surgery of it all, but also maintaining the vibe is the most important thing, and that's sort of I know I'm kind of going off what you asked, Robbie.
No,
but
no,
it's
that's interesting.
Sort of relevant to like how it all comes together.
Do you, and sorry, just to follow up, because I'm curious now, bringing in the music editing piece and I know that you also have the music supervisor who I think is, correct me if I'm wrong, responsible for picking a lot of the needle drops there.
Yes.
Is that something that you kind of know about? Like, when are those calls normally made, and when are those communicated to y'all?
Good point. Like this last episode, the credits, for example.
Yeah, I think Justine does the music for this show, and she is very, very talented.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's, again, we have a really strong team that can grab and maneuver. And I think as a music supervisor, you have to present several options and to the creatives, and they choose. And then there's also the time of, having to go get the clearance for the song and then making sure if an edit or cut changes, are the beats going to feel the same to the song? So there's so many little details.
Yeah.
And she works, she's just amazing at doing that. And so, the team was also very, very musical on this show. They're all very much fans of music and had, some ideas and things they wanted to try and do. So it was very much a collaborative sort of approach.
Yeah, in some cases, the songs will be in the script, and in some cases, those will end up in the show. And other times, there'll be challenges with it, like, oh, we wanted this song that's in the script in the show, but we can't afford it. The label isn't getting back to us. Whatever the reasons are. And in those cases, everyone sort of comes together, and that's where like Justine, the music soup, will come in and suggest ideas. But as Taylor said, like the whole team on this project is very like music driven. So everyone from the showrunner and the directors and the Marvel execs, they all have, great music taste. So it was real fun to work with everyone.
And I will say some scenes are cut to the track. So like if they're in the script, when the editors get the dailies or the pieces and they're assembling the whole thing, they're cutting the beats to a song. So that's why if you wonder like, wow, why is this song so perfect?
Yeah.
It's beats. It's because they cut to it.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And not to keep going on this, but it's super relevant to like this week's episode. That whole, because you guys have seen this week's episode already, I'm sure, right?
Oh yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So that whole like end scene was, designed to play with like score and songs and obviously dialogue and all the sound effects that are happening while like the dancing is going on, for example. Luckily Taylor was like the main person in charge of that scene. I got the nod it on that. I mean, we both help each other, but that's a lot to do when you're weaving in and out of music, because you want to you don't want to pretend that you're the song that's playing, right? But you also don't want to like rub. So you have to consider like certain keys are just going to bother people who are like not musically inclined. So you want to stay away from that, but you don't necessarily want to be in the same key. And then anyway, so it was really fun this week to sort of work with all of that.
It was a masterpiece is what it was this week.
Yeah.
Thanks, God.
That scene especially. Yeah, geez.
Okay, Robbie, I'm going to hijack this for a second. I have two, overarching questions I'm going to get to in 1 second. But since you just brought this up, I was kind of curious, what are the advantages or disadvantages to you guys composing stuff together? I mean, how did you guys start as a team doing this together? And in what ways is the collaboration helpful, or is it ever hurtful?
No, I would say there's not really, the way that we work. There's no more disadvantages. Maybe when we first started together, it was a little, trying to get things to smoothly, go between machines and stuff. But no, I mean, we've been doing this for years and years now. And we met, we were friends, and he was writing on movies and tons of stuff, and I was a fan of his work. And so it's definitely hugely beneficial, now, especially because there's multiple ideas that are filtering constantly, as another person, almost like having you're writing a script and you're sharing ideas, and certain things will trigger other ideas, and you go back and forth. And it allows also a filtering process before, creatives are hearing the final pieces, because it's really important that especially with something that you yourself are such a big fan of, you want to do justice by the project. And there's always lots of input and feedback too. There's a lot of, it's a team effort. It's not just here's the music and go,
Sure.
There's a lot of input. So it helps having someone else, kind of give you feedback as well, being like, I really like this theme, but I don't like this sound. And, it really allows a layering process.
Does one of you act more as the producer and one more as the writer, or is it pretty shared? Or no, it's pretty shared.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty equal, and it's kind of similar to. I mean, you guys are musicians, so you know when you've written something and you really dig it, and then you bring in somebody to play trumpet or play drums on it or like play on it, and you play it for them and they're like, cool, I got the idea. And then they do something and it kind of blows your mind. And you're like, oh my gosh, I thought this was like a 9 out of 10. And then you just played on it. And now I realize it was actually like a 5 out of 10. And now it's actually a 9 out of 10. That's not to say we make each other's tracks 9 out of 10 all the time, but it's more about like the excitement of passion and influence when you're sort of trying to figure out what works, because it's tricky, right? You might fall into something where you're like doing the same thing again. And Taylor and I are really good about trying to like, yo man, we've done that before. Like we can't fall back on that. And sometimes people want us to do something that we've already done, and that's tricky too, because you want to try to. Radiohead does a great job of it, like the fans immediately are like, wait, what am I listening to? But
sure.
Like you start to listen to it and you're like, oh man, I'm on the cruise, I love it, like this is
they're kind of
lots of artists do it. Yes, totally. But it's a hard thing to do because it's so easy to just fall into like, oh, this worked, so let's just roll with that, and like Daredevil, there are things that work in action scenes that just like sit easily behind action, which is just like driving, pulsing percussion. But that's not always the answer, and so a lot of like in Daredevil, a lot of what we found was working was like the motor of like the organ playing very quickly, very simple passages, but very quickly, and using the organ in place of like big sort of driving drums and pulses.
It's almost like the difference between being true to it in substance and being true in form, where I think that you can do one and not the other. And I think that there's a world where you can do something that sounds a lot like what people would expect a Daredevil score to sound like, but it doesn't click correctly. And that way it doesn't feel true to it. And I think that seems to me like it would be an easy trap to fall into if you're being asked to repeat something that's happened before that you've done before.
Yeah. And I think there's always a third element, which is that that it's not always a prescriptive situation where they're like, hey, this is what we want. It's changing based off of feedback, multiple opinions, edits. So it's what you might think will work for one thing may not work later. So, it is a bit of a process.
In regards to the theme, because I'm looking at Robbie's X-Men 97 vinyl over here, and we actually had John Pisano on the show a couple times before to talk about his work with Spider-Man and then obviously with Daredevil. Talk to me about the theme. What's it like reworking a theme that's already existing, and how is it different than what you had to do with X-Men 97? Because you also had to do that main theme there too. And I guess what elements to the version that we got do you feel like better suit Born Again versus like what the Netflix series was doing?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Well, first of all, the original intention wasn't necessarily to use the Born Again, use the original Netflix theme, because the show wasn't. It was more about a reboot rather than a continuation and expansion. And then after the strike came back and they made changes, and then they did reshoots and edits and all different things. They creatively decided to, hey, we need to expand this, we need to do this, and it was very much a talked about decision. and thankfully so, because it really is really what the fans, I think, really wanted. They wanted a continuation of the series, and this expands upon that. So it's not just a straight like here's season 4. There are changes, and it's also time has passed. Matt is in a different place, and so we really wanted to, at that point, how do we take the theme that's existing and make it work for this story? So, we added organ, more choral pieces, really bringing in sort of those elements. And then the big thing for us was, Matt Murdock, what is his theme when he's not Daredevil? And that is sort of why, even in the intro, you see the beginning before it goes into the Daredevil theme. It's just Matt's theme, because he's essentially what the impetus is that sort of gets him going for the whole season is the fact that he lost one of his best friends. And so he's not in that, he's sort of internally struggling. He's haunted by choices he's made, things, he blames himself for what has happened. So that is sort of where we are. Isn't just, the superhero of it all. It's the fact that he's broken.
I love that, because that we've talked all through the season about how much like this show, or whether you consider this a season or a new series, of all the great Daredevil stuff that we've gotten so far, I feel like this is the first time we've gotten this much of a look at Matt just as Matt. Like, both because of plot wise, he's not putting on the Daredevil suit as much, or at least for the first chunk of the series, but also because we kind of just get to see him have a healthy, functioning life. Yeah. So
he's
think
always broken down in the original Netflix stuff. He's never actually functioning well.
So like hearing you talk about having that in mind, I think that's come across really well kind of throughout the series.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I think, we did lots of variations of even the intro piece. And as I think, being a fan even of the original Netflix series, I love the theme that John wrote, and I think it's really strong. And I think too, as fans, you become acclimated to certain pieces of music and even the way things are shot and color palettes, and I think that it's tricky trying to expand on that and change it and sort of enhance it. And I really feel like the team really wanted to sort of honor the existing material and sort of expand it from there. And I think that was the intention. So we were all kind of, on the same train.
That's a fascinating discussion in and of itself, because throughout the MCU, just as one example, there are times where, like, when the Avengers show up, you need the Avengers theme, because as fans, like, we're looking for, it's like Pavlov's dogs. We need that theme. Right. But then there's other characters that have, like Thor, for example. Every film has been a different motif for him. And there are times where we're like, oh man, I kind of wish it was like the first one. Why not build on the first one? But then, like, at first I judged what Michael Giacchino did for the fourth one. And then over time, I'm now obsessed with it. And so I think even that's a fascinating discussion, like when to reboot a theme versus when to keep it going. It's not even really a question, just interesting to me.
Yeah. Do we lose Andy? He's
reconnecting.
He's reconnecting. Yeah. I mean, I think it's a great point you bring up. And I think the answer is like X-Men 97, for instance, we really didn't change a lot on that. You know what I mean? That opening of that theme. It was more about modernizing it a little bit, and sort of, even in the recording process with an orchestra, that's going to make it sound different. And, oh, you're back. There you are. And sort of, it's what I feel like the fans, or what we felt like, the fans wanted to see. And I feel like also the executives were like, wanted the same thing,
Yeah, let's connect it.
Yeah, it's connected. And so you hear that theme and you're like, oh, that's the X-Men. And I think there's some places where it's tricky, like Superman. You hear what Hans did on Superman, and you hear there's the original John Williams Superman. And I think it's a tricky line. I think when you have a complete recast and it's like all new people, does that warrant the time to bring in new themes? It's a good question.
I'm curious, you know, because I was going to ask before we came on what the pivot halfway through that creative process did musically and kind of where y'all were. It sounds like you had made a good bit of headway before the decision was made to bring on new, a new showrunner and directors. Did y'all, how much of the original music that you had created is still in the series, and how much was totally reworked or reinvented after that decision?
A lot of it, actually. I think we had a pretty good, in our sort of first run at music. I mean, I would say most of it is actually in there, with the exception of,
oh, nice.
I mean, we probably wrote about 4 hours of music in the sort of beginning phase of our sort of concept. Now, that's not all fully produced, but like it's in some stages. Some are fully produced, some are just like mocked out ideas on a variety of instruments. But I would say most of them are in there in some capacity, with the exception of maybe, I mean, probably 70% of the music we wrote is in the show now. And the other 30% that's not in there is just, conceptually just, other ideas that just didn't quite land for, and a lot of it's trying things. I mean, one of our first ideas was like, let's take John's theme and just play the whole thing on a church organ, just that, just all by itself, So that doesn't exist in the show anywhere, but that was like one idea, and then sort of riffing off of like where that could land. And as Taylor said earlier, figuring out like, okay, where like the storyline for this season is very much about Matt and his sort of conflicted sort of point of view. And we wanted to have sort of that be prevalent or a part of the main title in conjunction with Daredevil.
I really want those demos to be released at some point. That seems like something that could show up on a vinyl. I'm just saying. I'm sure there are a lot of people that have to sign off on that sort of thing, but I'm at least planting the seed.
You're asking for a friend. I want to get you guys out of here on one compliment and then a really last in the weeds nerdy question. First of all, I just want to say, compliment wise, I love that you leaned into the organ and the choir, because this podcast, the listeners know I'm a huge sucker for the choir stuff. So I love that you brought that in so much. It just makes everything so epic.
Thank you.
And on that, the really in the weeds nerdy question, this is more for me than anyone else. I see all the synths behind you, Andy. I'm curious, where in the process do you do you decide when something should be a sample versus when something should be real? So like, how much of it is our plug-in strings versus we got to get an orchestra, or this is a sound we can only create on a synth that we can't really create with a real orchestra, versus, or even like choir patches versus getting an actual choir to do it? Like, how do you blend that? And is it literally just a song by song thing, or is there something more like from a vibe perspective that informs that decision?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, at first, it's the necessity, like in writing, right? Like what Taylor and I are sort of like held to based off of what we have in our rooms. So Taylor has even more synthesizers than I have. He's got like the mad scientist lab over there, but it's sort of like at first limited to what we can play, which is, like piano, cello, like a variety of like wind instruments, guitars, whatever. But then also like singing and layering vocals, and then using samples. And then it gets to a place where like the production becomes as big a part of it as the writing, for us at least. On our end, we like to sort of get the writing going, but we've sort of found over the years that like during that writing, because of technology, the producing starts happening, as you guys know, right? When you're sitting in with it, like you'll do something that maybe 25 years ago they'd save until the mix to like dial in how the kick sounds. But in this case, like we might like I'm a terrible drummer. So like I will use like drum samples, or I will perform like found sound, and then I will chop it up because I can't keep good rhythm. But then there's the dialing in of the sound, right? Like if like in Born Again, we wanted to use we were trying to use big percussion for some of these hits we have for Fisk, and they just didn't have like the severity of a big thud. And so we grabbed like a car, like basically like my old car. When I dropped the hood, I was like checking the oil, and I noticed like it makes a huge thud. So we recorded that. And that then ended up replacing some of these like deep, big water bottles we'd been hitting, like with a variety of amounts of water in them. But that sort of process is just sort of like the in the weeds of like where this goes with everything, right? And that applies to the orchestra and choir as well. Like we will usually record everything with the orchestra and the choir, but then we'll take sort of a producer's seat afterwards and go like, okay, the real choir is a nice texture here, but let's sync it underneath the sound of like the layers of Taylor and I, or, you know, Taylor and his assistant Lily, or whatever's being sort of like put in the track. So it really
is that one of you guys doing the
yeah, that's Taylor. Yeah,
it is
Taylor.
Taylor.
Nice.
Yeah. Heck yes, dude.
Yeah.
Okay,
Man,
that makes me
that's
happy.
so cool.
Yeah, so you sorry not to interrupt you, but you're just balancing that stuff every time. Sometimes you're recording the orchestra and choir, so you've written it, you kind of start the production with the tones, then you record an orchestra and choir, and then you kind of dial back from there. Like, can we supplement the fake strings? Can we supplement this sound that we made in our studio? And it becomes like a hybrid model.
Yeah, I think I mean, everything we tend to do, unless it's a period piece, is always hybrid. I think because we're really into the production of the sound and honing in. Almost the score is almost being treated like an album. It's almost more like a
sound design-y.
Well, not just sound design-y, but like for instance, we use rather than electric cello, we use an acoustic cello that's being processed, and it's delayed, and it's pitching down for Born Again as he's sort of using his senses to see what's going on. And that's sort of like that, rather than, you know, making a sonar sound or just some heartbeat, like we have, that is sort of the sensation that the viewer's supposed to be feeling that's happening. And we tried the orchestra doing the same thing, and it just was it just didn't have that sort of feel to it. So we just played solo cello, and we processed it and ran it through things. And as Hank said, so it's more about, you know, at the end of the day, it's more about how does it make us feel and sound, and it needs to be, you know, it needs to be different, but you need to have all of the availability to see at the end of the day what sounds the best, because you may not want a very like 100% super cleanly, like, you know, phenomenally played piece. You may want it to have subtleties that give it sort of nuances. I think that's the
last thing, I swear, just because you said this. So you said like you took a cello. I'm sorry. And you pitched it down and blah, 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 blah. And you were saying that was because you're messing with the idea of Matt's senses, right?
Yeah, there's a sequence where he's following a cop that Officer Powell, you can see. Yes.
Is that first, or a chicken or the egg? So did you think like, oh, how do we get this sound? Because Matt's messing with his senses. Maybe we took a cello, or did you try the cello thing and then go, hey, that could actually work because it's like his senses?
That's a good question.
Yeah, no, we basically knew what we were going after, some, like, you know, his sort of equivalent of Spidey senses. We knew we wanted something. We had sort of like, you know, heartbeats that were like delayed. We had we had subway sounds being sucked out almost as pads, which ends up actually in the main titles. But the cello thing worked well because it's cello delayed, but like on the others, get super nerdy, one of the pedals has a pitch that pitches it up. You can degree how you want, like a minor third, or how much you want it to fall out of tune. And so we had the delay sort of echoing, and then it would at the end sort of pitch a little bit down, and that's kind of what is happening.
This is the do 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 do. Yeah, that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Gosh, thank you. I just wasted a lot of your time, but that was so fascinating.
No, that's really fascinating. The like slamming the car hood down that's a really fun fact.
It's fun, guys. Yeah,
it's fun.
Well,
yeah.
You guys are the best. Thanks for your time. Sorry to go long here, but man, we are such big fans of what you do. And we said this last time, the invitation is open. Standing invitation. Anytime you want to jump on and talk about it. We could go for another hour. I have more questions.
You guys rock,
I was just telling
super fun.
Kyle about how y'all have Life of Chuck coming out here in a couple months. And that's going to be a really fun one to talk about too.
Bring tissues.
We'll have to definitely connect on that one as well. Yeah.
I read I'm a Stephen King fan, so I read the short story years ago. So I was really excited when I saw the folks involved. Obviously, Mike and the cast on that is insane. And then seeing y'all attached to it was the icing on the cake for me.
Yeah, oh, thank you. Yeah, Mike. I mean, obviously, Mike is just such a talented guy in so many levels, and that story is that is a very special story. Yeah.
We'll come back on with you guys once it comes out because it'd be fun to talk about that one with you guys.
Yeah, I'd love that.
Perfect. Okay, you guys are the best. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.